Joining us from the Netherlands, Dutch MP Geert Wilders. And he's joining us because he has received assassination threats for his support to Nupur Sharma back here in India. Welcome, Mr. Wilders.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be on your show today.
And let's begin by asking, what made you support Nupur Sharma?
Well, I believe Nupur Sharma did nothing else but speak the truth. She spoke about the Prophet Muhammad, and what she said was literally in the hadith. It was the truth what she said. And I find it very incomprehensible that for speaking the truth, she got death threats. Her own party distanced himself from her. There were international protests from other countries, which I believe is unacceptable. Nupur Sharma should be applauded. Her own Hindu gods were attacked and ridiculized, and she reacted by speaking the truth, and everybody now is angry on her, and I find it unacceptable. You know, it's the intolerance of Islam that makes it impossible for her to speak the truth, and I want to support her.
You know, in India, we have coexisted for over a millennia, our religion here and Islam, and it's a dialogue internal to our politics in many ways. And in fact, the government has acted, taken care of the fallout, and even the judiciary is involved. But what I am interested in asking you is, who are these people who are threatening you with death back there in Netherlands?
First, if you allow me, let me tell you what I stated before, that secularism might be important, but secularism does not mean that you can demean Hindu gods. But if you tell the truth about Muhammad, that you get death threats. That is unacceptable, and that is not the meaning of secularism. Now, who is giving me the death threats? They are coming from all over, I believe, the Islamic world. People that I can see that are sending messages from either Pakistan or even from Arab countries, from the Palestinian territories, from Saudi Arabia, many countries, and even also some people from inside India, but most of them from Pakistan, that are threatening me because I support what Nupur Sharma said, and I told publicly that she only spoke the truth about Muhammad, and only the fact that I support somebody like Nupur Sharma who spoke the truth means that I, far away from India, in the kingdom of the Netherlands, people threatened to kill me. They sent me pictures with guns, with knives, with my head being cut off. It's really ridiculous. But once again, I will not be intimidated by that, because that is what they want. But I will continue proudly to support Nupur Sharma.
Right. Mr. Wilders, you know, I was saying that we have coexisted for over a millennia, and for most of the history done well of the coexistence. But in Europe, things seem to be different. We have had the episode of Charlie Hebdo a couple of years back, and more than a decade back, in fact, of Gilles Posten, essentially about freedom of speech and how the two communities see it differently. So I think you see the Nupur Sharma episode going there?
Yeah, it is about freedom of speech. It is about tolerance and intolerance. And unfortunately, for many of the Arab nations who were angered at the Indian authorities, they believe that, as is also part of the Organization of Islamic Conference, the OIC, they have this declaration about human rights called the Cairo Declaration. And it states that freedom of speech, according to them, is limited to Sharia law. This is really what is in their Declaration of Cairo about human rights. They believe, the Organization of Islamic Conference and all the nations that subscribe to that, from Egypt to Pakistan and all the other Islamic nations, that freedom of speech is bound to the boundaries of Sharia law. And we all know that Sharia law has nothing to do with freedom. You are unfree within Sharia law. You can do everything but criticize Islam. And we in India, in Holland. We are free nations. We have a rule of law. We have democracy. We have independent courts who can correct somebody if he oversteps the law. But we should never be intimidated by organizations of the Islamic Conference or of Muslims in our country. You know, in Holland, in my country, Holland, we have 17 million people. 1 million of those 17 are people from Islamic background. And let me tell you that 70%, 70 of the Muslims in Holland believe that their own religious laws are more important than our secular, democratic laws made by parliament. So 7 out of 10 Muslims, even in Holland, believe that Sharia law is more important than the law that we make in our parliament. So we have in Western Europe an enormous problem with people
have you been able
that
to do
are not
something about
enough
it?
integrating.
Have you been able to do something about it? Not just in Holland, but across Europe, in fact?
Well, unfortunately, we do not do too much because many times in many countries, leaders are in charge who are cultural relativists, who believe that all cultures are equal. I believe not in cultural relativism. I believe that people are equal. Every person is equal, but a culture based on freedom and the values of democracy, like our culture and your culture, like Christianity and Hinduism, is far better than a culture that is based on violence or on submission, like the Islamic culture. So we have a lot of mass immigration from Africa, from Asia, from the Middle East, and most of our leaders lack the ability to ask people, to demand people, to integrate in our societies and make our law number one. So unfortunately, we are failing today.
Yeah, in fact, the United Nations, I think, recently discussed the International Day of Islamophobia. So one view is that, in fact, all these things are a reaction to the kind of Islamophobia that exists, particularly in West.
Well, Islamophobia is of course not the real problem here. The problem is Islam, not Islamophobia. We have nothing against people who abide by our constitution, who abide by our values of freedom. We have a problem with totalitarian ideologies like Islam that many people unfortunately find unfree. So Islamophobia, if it even exists, of course, is something that is not the problem today. Where we have problems in Europe, and I believe also the example of Nupur Sharma now in India, is that people who subscribe to the ideas and the life of Islam and Muhammad, that they make problems for people who speak the truth. And this is something that really should stop today. And it's, for me, unacceptable that a lady like Nupur Sharma, I understood that in many cities, Mumbai, Kolkata, Bhiwandi, Boywada, she has to appear before the police for charges of hurting religious feelings. And that is totally unacceptable. I will not intervene, of course, in the Indian law. But how can somebody like Nupur Sharma, who spoke the truth about Muhammad, how can she be charged by a criminal law in a democracy like India? I think it's unacceptable, and I cannot really believe it.
Well, Mr. Wellness, Nupur Sharma has protection, and of course, the law would take its own course as it exists in India. But thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you are also provided adequate protection by your authorities there.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I have this protection already for almost 17 years. I living in safe houses now for speaking the truth, and it was a pleasure. And hope to see you next time in your show.